This video is an update of our project to convert a rainwater detention basin to a reconstructed prairie. To recap, about 5 years ago, this land was cleared of all its trees to build suburban homes. As part of that project, the sewer district required the developer to install a rainwater detention basins, and it was mostly graded about 4 years ago, but its final grading and project completion occurred in January 2021. At that time, we convinced the developer to put down, instead of the required fescue turf, to put down prairie seeds, which they agreed since it was probably a lower cost. But on top of that, it required also straw mats to help prevent erosion. So that was the most of what happened a year and a half ago. We spent last year helping it get established. It was us waiting for spring to happen. So now it's first week of June, and wanted to show our recent progress and maybe pass on a few lessons learned, especially that apply to the spring and early summer of the detention basin to prairie reconstruction project. The first lesson was that color counts. I recall several neighbors wondering when our common ground prairie reconstruction would start showing some results. And of course, in the first year, there's nothing to show since everything was quite short, and that year was spent on controlling invasives. Now, in the early part of our second year, there is something to show for it. As you can see, the Coreopsis was very welcome, as essentially it's the only color to come along in the early part of the second year of our prairie project. Another major lesson learned was that not all weeds and invasives are necessarily bad, and I'll show you our experience with clover. So here's why I have mixed feelings about the white clover that's moved in. As you can see, it's just a solid carpet, and it was not part of the original seed mix, but it just seems to have moved right in. It's the same white clover that everyone hates in their lawns, but this is basically an uninvited guest. Yes, a weed, but at least a couple things happening. One is it is supporting the pollinators. So the bees have moved in and been quite happy, this moth. And it's not just one spot, it is the whole area is just solid clover. A couple places I've mowed it to make a path and the clovers come right in. So, is that a problem? We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, there's way too much to try to control, either by hand or chemical means. Interspersed among all the clover is quite a bit of very desirable plants. These Coreopsis were part of the original seed mix. The ones towards the front, I planted extra Coreopsis. In amongst this is, of course, common milkweed. The bugs have liked it, and I found a few eggs being planted on the bottom, but no larvae yet. Here it is, second week of June. But we'll have no trouble with getting milkweed established here, so I'll let all those go. But as you can see, the taller plants have no problem pushing up through the clover. Last year's cover crop was wheat. A little bit of wheat's come back this year, and certainly no problem there. It's good food for the birds and other wildlife. The third lesson is that many invasives are shallow-rooted annuals and need to be controlled in their early flowering stages before they set seed. And fitting into that category, I'll show some examples of cheatgrass, sericea, and some other rapidly growing weeds that could take over the project if they weren't dealt with early. So here we have an example of one of our recently recognized invasives. This is, if you find this to be a pretty plant with this bowing panicles of seed heads and very soft flowing, bobbing, and then you have what's known as downy brome. But if you recognize it for the invasive that it is and the fact that it overpowers everything that it moves into, then you'll probably call it cheatgrass. The thing about cheatgrass is that it grows very quickly, overpowers and steals nutrients from the plants around it. Out west, it's a well-known, very nuisance invasive. All in all, it's a fairly pretty plant, and that's probably why the first year I didn't do much when I first saw it, but as it moved in, I did I recognized how much trouble it was, and so this is the year for moving in on and starting to remove cheatgrass. At least it has the advantage of being just an annual, which means that it tends not to come back from its roots but only reseeds. So if you can manage the seeds, then you at least manage next year's growth. But on top of that, though, since it's a very rapidly growing plant, it doesn't have much of a root, so consequently it pulls up very easily. Then the next problem becomes, what do you do with all this? So I found myself, when I have the energy, I'll go ahead and pull it and mulch my path with the blades. But otherwise, if I'm in a hurry and I don't have time to pull it, I'll go ahead and at least take my cutter and cut off the seed head. Also kind of slow and cumbersome. Really, it takes two hands. One hand's covering with my gloves, and the other hand gloved hand pulling the weed tight, and it will cut a little bit easier. So here's an area that was cleaned out last week, and you see the dead stems of the cheatgrass. And actually, I could tell there's been a lot more growth from the established prairie plants around it. Here I have coneflowers, false sunflower blooming over there. But the removing the cheatgrass was very helpful in giving these little extra advantage of sun and soil nutrients. So after a few minutes of pulling, the cheatgrass comes up pretty quickly, pretty easily. But of course, as it does, then we see a few of the secondary invasives. We see like horseweed. That certainly needs to be picked. Otherwise, that'll take over. Horseweed and cheatgrass are moving in because this was all forest area and then regraded about 5 years ago. We moved in 4 years ago when I started planting. And so these guys certainly like to move into this disturbed area. So it's kind of my job to keep them in check. at least until the prairie plants can get established. Cheatgrass and horseweed have the one common feature is that they're very shallow roots, so they do pull up fairly easily. And if you can catch them before they go to seed, then you can get a better control on them, at least next year. And as they pull up, yet another invasive comes to light. This little yellow, tiny yellow flower is a Lespedeza, but it's not going to come along quite as far as the cheatgrass and horseweed because it's pretty well shaded by this point. So I'll pull the Lespedeza where I find it, but I'm not going to go out of my way. I'm certainly not going to spray it, at least in this area, because it's pretty well established with other plants. When I have a few odd forb here, I'll just give it a chance and see what it turns into before I pull it. I'm certainly reserving judgment on the numerous goldenrods that are moving in. Right now they'll probably add to the overall appearance of, and they certainly support the pollinators. More Lespedeza. Little geranium. Another part of the plot, the geranium have the purple flowers that make them so attractive. But this Lespedeza really does move in, so I'll hit it when I see it, but if I go after anything, I'm going after the horseweed, so it doesn't have a chance to go to seed. These annuals, like the cheatgrass, Lespedeza, horseweed, at least have one feature that's helpful for the gardener, that is, they're annuals, so if you can catch them before they go to seed, then you have a better control of them. So here's one forb trying to make its way out. It looks like a pale purple coneflower, which I certainly want to encourage, but it's having a hard time amongst all these other invasives. So that's the chore for the June gardener, is getting these invasives that are annuals and catch them before they can go to seed. So you can see a lot of cheatgrass in this area mixed into several desirable things, so there's no quick and easy fix to this except sort of dive in and pull it by hand. Another lesson for weeding is that not all uninvited guests are weeds. Here's some purple aster, which I'm happy to let thrive here. But of course right next to it is this one here is horseweed, and my hard-earned lesson on horseweed is you have to pull it from the roots. If you cut it from the base, you'll get 3 shoots up from the stump. So pulling is the only control, and at least since it's a rapidly growing invasive, it tends to have very shallow roots, so it pulls easily. All right, coming along. I see plenty more cheatgrass out there, so I'll be busy. And of course, not all grasses are considered a nuisance or invasive. This is a steep hillside, so I appreciate the grasses helping to hold the ground, preventing erosion. Here's a stand of orchard grass, which I know was not in our original native seed mix, but and it is a non-native, but I'm happy to let it stay for this year since it tends to be a little less aggressive than the cheatgrass. We'll let you know next year if that was a mistake. So hope these videos are helpful. If you're thinking of turning a unused or otherwise underutilized space near you to turn into a prairie and native planting, I hope this will be useful because it sure has been fun. See you next time.
Blue of the night.